Where do you begin when reviewing Attack on Titan? I began my Attack on Titan journey only about a year and a half ago, and it was probably the most requested manga that I would begin to cover on this channel. It is impossible to even have a basic knowledge of the anime community and not to have heard about this series. Its anime adaptation has been talked about as one of the best manga to anime transitions, and for most it is the primary way to consume the material. But because I like to do things different, I chose to go the route of the manga. A manga that lasted 10 years and changed the landscape of its medium to the point where it's safe to say that Attack on Titan will go down in history as a staple of manga itself, earning itself a slot next to the other titans like Dragon Ball, One Piece, and Berserk. And yeah, no pun intended there. But now that the voyage is finally over, I can take a step back and reflect on the entire series start to finish and give some of my fully realized thoughts. No longer trying to piece together the puzzle, but to see its completion in front of us. So what does this manga that takes us into a dark, unforgiving world of monsters and survival really mean? It's as though the discovery of what this manga is truly trying to say parallels the journey of the characters trying to discover the truth of their own world. Attack on Titan is layered with twists and turns in taking what you think you know about the world and turning it on its head. And it does this again and again and again, constantly pushing its characters to their breaking point, challenging their ideals and motivations, and flipping the script, turning villains into heroes and heroes into villains, until you start to understand that Attack on Titan is meant to paint the world not so unlike our own, where the only real difference in who is a hero and who is a villain is whose perspective you're currently looking through, turning a known black and white world into further shades of gray. Tackling topics as deep as classism, racism, subjugation, patriotism, indoctrination, government cover-up and conspiracies, the justifications of war, and what does it truly mean to have freedom, and can it ever actually be achieved? All the while having intense, fast-paced battles between humans and giant monstrosities called Titans. To summarize Attack on Titan correctly is a nearly impossible task, and to do this video I am no doubt going to have to delve into spoilers to an extent. I will say that if you have not dived into Attack on Titan yet and you want to avoid any spoilers, this video is not for you right now. And if you are an anime only watcher, you will be mostly safe until towards the end of the video, and I'll try to give you some sort of warning when I get into manga only stuff. But generally, this is going to be sort of a brief kind of overview of the series and not delving too much into hardcore spoilers. I am making this a review specifically also of the manga and not the anime. So the beginning premise of Attack on Titan that's meant to hook the audience is we are showcasing a world that has been overrun by giant monsters called Titans. Monsters that have no clear motive or objective other than to simply scour the land looking for humans to eat them. They are like giant zombies and have no clear intelligence or way to communicate. As well, they vary in size, strength, and speeds. What is left of humanity is sanctuaried inside 3 even more giant walls, keeping them safe from the Titans. Or so they believe. The manga essentially begins with the largest Titan ever seen so far by man appearing seemingly out of nowhere and crashing through the outermost wall, destroying the illusion of peace humanity was given and unleashing Titans through the first wall, making what was left of humanity even smaller than it was before. One Titan that was let loose, eating the mother of our protagonist Eren right in front of him, giving him the motivation to join the Survey Corps, a branch of the military trained to try to venture as far as they can outside the walls, fight against the Titans, and hopefully search for things that can better help humanity in these destructive times. And so the premise seems simple enough, humanity versus Titans, but that is not what Attack on Titan is actually about, at all. But this was the brilliance of the opening premise because we are put into the same mindset of our characters. We only see things from inside the wall that we constructed to keep other things out. The audience has a limited understanding of a wider perspective, and that is exactly the point of the series. See, to me, one of the main ideas Attack on Titan has to share is the reality of war, and the manga reflects the realism through its fantasy. Inside of the walls, the government and those in charge construct the narrative of which people are meant to follow. When writing history, they leave out anything that could make them look bad or gloss over ideas that others may ask, like, what if more people existed outside the walls? Well, that's preposterous. Nothing is outside the walls except monsters. like a country paranoid to lose its patriotism once the truth was revealed to the public at large. No, everybody must pledge their allegiance, and this lack of communication, even between their own people, is only the tip of the iceberg. Blindly following instead of questioning is what's rewarded. And as we get further into the series, we start to learn the truth about the Titans, that each Titan was actually once a human being, and that there are 9 particularly special Titans out there that can retain their consciousness and control the Titans once they're transformed, turning themselves into basically a flesh Gundam. And that the power and value of one of these 9 Titans is worth mountains of military technology. Basically, whoever has the most Titans has the most power to enslave the world as they see fit. And as these special Titans begin to appear, begin to show that they are intelligent, and begin to reveal themselves as infiltrating the very military system set out to fight them, the manga begins to take a very different turn. As in, who are these Titans, where did they come from, and why did they start to attack in the first place? The worldview of Attack on Titan is shattered when more and more of the truth is revealed, and this is super important for the characters, but I will get back to them in a moment. What was inside the walls of Paradis was a beautiful lie to keep them separated from the reality of the world, filled with other humans, as Paradis itself sits in an isolated island away from the rest of the world at large. Marley is the leading world power, and has a hold on most of the Titan abilities, needing them all to maintain their place of dominance as the world begins to continuously advance in technological weapons. The shift to Marley, first through the flashbacks of Eren Yeager, take us directly into imagery that reflect World War II and the separation between people. World War II was always a very interesting time of struggle to me because it's one of those wars where, in the Europe portion at least, it's mostly all white people that look relatively the same. What I mean is telling somebody apart from German, French, British, etc., it wasn't as easy as just looking at their skin color or some sort of obvious wardrobe difference. Everyone was practically the same, and yet this arbitrary difference of one happens to be Jewish got you thrown into a barbaric difference of life. It just so happened that one was in power and the other wasn't. A way to tell the difference is where they were allowed to live and the markers on their sleeve to indicate which group that they belong to. And we see this in Attack on Titan. The Eldians represent the oppressed while the Marleyans represent those in power. And the only real difference is, well, if you inject an Eldian with spinal Titan fluid, they turn into a giant Titan. Okay, that's a pretty big deal, but not something that can happen other than by force. But because they are infected, because they are different, they are deemed as devils. And everyone is indoctrinated into thinking so from the moment that they are born, to the point where you can't even blame them from thinking so. It's as simple as growing up saying this is good, this is bad, what you're told to by your parents and all your authority figures. Why would you question it? It's just the way things are. Hate, separation, it's all taught by those in power. There's no room for communication with it. And believing themselves to be devils, Eldians fall in line to the pecking order without question. Even special Eldians are chosen to work for Marley in hopes of passing along the Titan powers so that they can use them for Marley and sort of redeem themselves in their eyes and help Marley become the continuing dominant power. But is it really that deep? Is it anything more than a series about war and subjugation over the things that you can't control? Well, yes, Attack on Titan also has a very large ensemble cast that carries the stories to intense highs and lows because of their involvement. And to look at the confusion and frustration as all the fabrications come to light and the truths of the world are unveiled, we need to look no further than our protagonist, Eren Yeager. Eren has been called the greatest protagonist of all time by some, and with the recent final chapter, he's also been called the worst protagonist. How I view Eren is neither of those, but really I think of him as a tragic character that takes the tropes of what a protag is usually known for, and instead of rewarding Eren for his efforts, the story continues to knock him down into the dirt. What do I mean by this? Eren opens the manga not caring about anything except exterminating the Titans and seeing what is beyond the walls. His views in reality are very simple, and as a result, he makes decisions as a very simple-minded character, at least for a time. And there's a great moment early on where Eren is trying to decide to use his Titan powers or not, and neither option seems like a good one. But that's the point of the scene, in that this is war, and in war you need to make fast decisions that will affect the lives of others. You don't have time to weigh all of the options. It's not about the right or wrong decision, it's about just being able to make one. And Eren wants to accomplish one thing, and as things go on, more and more of his understood worldview is shaken in front of him. From understanding that the Titans he faces are human, to the realization that he himself is also a Titan. And that fact gets him continuously beaten up and kidnapped for a good first half of the manga. But there is a major shift in Eren's character, both as he acquires multiple Titan abilities within himself, and also as the fantasy of what the world could be like is destroyed by seeing what it is actually like. Eren's struggle is in wanting the black and white solution, in wanting to end war in one fell swoop, in wanting there to be an endless, vast landscape for his friends to thrive on outside of the walls. Instead, what he found were just more walls, more barriers that he had to overcome, and more people limiting his reality. He couldn't just kill his enemies and let his loved ones be free like he wanted, but still, he would try. Eren pushed against the reality of the world as hard and violently as one possibly could, resulting in the chaotic final arc of the story that I won't completely spoil here in this video. But if you want, I have reviewed the entire series, so you can check out my playlist. Anyway, some other characters that I want to mention. Mikasa Ackerman, of course, is a major character that does not get enough credit for her arc, because many fans tend to see Mikasa as a one-note character, but her story is one of the most important in the entire manga. See, Mikasa was saved by Eren as a small child when her home was invaded by men who wanted to abduct her. Eren, as a small child himself, violently attacked and killed them, telling Mikasa if she wants to survive, that she has to fight. And this is extremely important, as it does two things for her. It instills a sense of self-protection that she did not have before, being willing to do something horrible, even kill, for her own survival and the survival of her loved ones. And it also places Eren on a high pedestal in her mind as her protector, as the one that awoken her. And even as they grow older, Mikasa becomes the better fighter overall. She is still seemingly acting as Eren's protector, and will put herself in perilous danger for his sake. Now, Mikasa obviously loves Eren, but it's also deeper than that. Like the fantasy of having that vast openness beyond the walls, Mikasa's fantasy is that there will be a way for her and Eren to finally stop fighting and perhaps be at peace with one another. But every step of the way, that fantasy once again becomes dominated by the truth, and as Eren is slowly eroded by the change within himself, it pushes Mikasa to see if she is able to do what is right in spite of her feelings. Levi Ackerman is a veteran Survey Corps member and a man who has constantly had to make the hard choices for the greater good. Most of the best action moments come from his character, and he probably gets banged up and injured more than any other character, at least as far as those that can't regenerate. Levi is a fan favorite, and for the most part I can understand why. He's someone who grew up understanding the dark side of what humanity is capable of, yet still fights for the hope and prosperity of a potential great future. Reiner Braun, who slowly became my favorite character over time, and Eldian working for Marley, who helped infiltrate the Survey Corps on Paradis. Reiner is one of few parallels for Eren from the other side of the ocean, coming to Paradis under the indoctrination that he is fighting for what's right and that everyone here is his enemy. But it's not only that, but just how hard that Reiner had to push himself to get here in the first place, wanting justification for that struggle and that pain, only to find out that his illusion was also shattered when his enemies became his comrades. This leads to more of an internal self-loathing that we don't see in a lot of the other characters, and Reiner's confliction on which side is right and if he can manage to sustain his own ideals before breaking down completely is one of the greatest character arcs that I've read within this manga. And there are so many other characters to speak on. Armin and his timid nature and yet desire to actually talk and communicate through the darkness that is war. Historia and her understanding her birthright and choosing what to do with it herself. And Gabby. Gabby, again from the other side of the ocean as well. A character that is very much misunderstood by a portion of the fan base. Someone who again parallels Eren, seeing the other side as enemies and enacting that retaliation the first chance that she gets. Gabby's introduction is almost the same beat for beat as Eren's himself, and yet by the time that she is introduced in the series, the audience has spent so much time with Eren that they hate Gabby for how she chooses to retaliate against them. But in having fans hate Gabby, the manga succeeds in what the messages that it was trying to present from the get-go were. War often has no right or wrong side. Because you have read the story from the perspective of Eren and Paradis, you want to be on his side, and you disregard the unnecessary death and destruction that they cause. The same kind of death and destruction that the series began with, picking sides without understanding the other's point of view, or at least without sympathizing with it, without communicating and understanding the similarities between the two. All we can do is degrade due to the differences, to dehumanize someone else because they are on the wrong team. This is politics, this is war, and this is the fall of humanity, expressed so simply within this manga, and the fact that some people didn't even catch it, or if they did, they simply didn't care, which again just proves the point of the messages within Attack on Titan outright. Now, there are dozens upon dozens of other characters I could go into and cover, but this video would be way too damn long, so you're better off just reading the series for yourself. But perhaps the greatest theme or element featured in the manga is that of freedom. Ultimately, freedom is what we all desire, freedom to live the way that we want, and not under the thumb of another or stifled due to circumstances beyond our control. And for the most, even more than our own freedom, we desire the freedom for the ones that we care about most, or for our next generation. The complication comes when there are multiple opposing forces that all want the same thing. But there are also going to be limitations to the freedom, since your right to freedom can't impede on another person's right to freedom. And whose right is it to deem the first person's freedom more important than the second person's? Again, it is only those in control that bestow these rights, and it is only because they are in control that people listen. Eren's desire and dream to give his friends the freedom that they wanted was the driving force behind all of his decisions upon discovering what the world really had to offer. Now, there's also a spiritual aspect of the Titans themselves that I very much appreciated, and this has to do with the whole paths dimension and Ymir, and not to get too bogged down in it, but I always saw the Titans themselves like a curse that was placed upon Ymir, passed down from generation to generation afterwards, and with each generation an opportunity to break the curse by letting Ymir finally rest in peace, something she could not do herself, and instead was bound within a dimension where she would continuously wander and build more Titans. Now here comes the spoilery part from the manga, okay? So anime onlys, this is probably where you need to step away. Part of the tragedy of Eren was that despite making his own choices, he was able to see all past, present, and future due to his connection with the Titans in the paths dimension. So you could say Eren never had any freedom of his own, really. It's a little confusing, but just imagine seeing your future as clearly as you remember your past. You can't change your past, and just the same, Eren could not change his future. To him, it was all happening simultaneously. When he broke down and apologized to the Marleyan boy, he was apologizing for something that he had yet to do physically, but had already felt in a memory. It was all the same. Eren was literally a slave to his own decisions, even the ones that he hadn't made yet. And those decisions were based on the idea of freedom. And like a parent to a child, giving his loved ones what he would never have, or wanting them to have a better life than what he had. The same way that Grisha Yeager, Eren's father, wished for a better life for Eren, trying to rectify the mistake that he made with Zeke. And then we have the infamous final chapter. I've already covered it specifically in its own video, I'll link that down below, but with the final chapter, everything aligns. The curse of Ymir and the Titans is broken by Mikasa doing what was right in spite of her love. Eren gets laid to rest from his broken, depressed slaughter, and the world begins to attempt to move forward by sharing the truth of what happened and not covering it up or rewriting history as it had been for so long on each side in order to justify their warring states against one another. There was no ultimate freedom for everyone. Eren was wrong to think that it could be accomplished, especially in the way that he decided to carry it out. There will always be war or things that make people hate each other, but by actually communicating and seeing the similarities rather than the differences in people, there is hope that these horrible things can be suppressed, and unification between others is shown to be possible. So Attack on Titan doesn't give us a fairy tale ending, and it also doesn't give us a bleak, destructive one. It leaves on a note of potential, on a understanding that things will always be in shades of gray. And maybe that's not what people were looking for. Maybe they want their own justification for backing a particular side for so long, to stand and shout that victory cheer alongside the other characters. But life isn't that simple, and there is no ending to life. Things just continue on. But it's how you choose to continue on, and in not ignoring the failings of the past, that you can try to move forward in a more positive way. Now, of course, Attack on Titan is not perfect, and there are things that bothered me, because sometimes in a series at such a breakneck pace as this one, some of the payoffs don't really last long enough to truly appreciate them. For example, the Warhammer Titan was mostly missing for the large run of the manga, and when it was finally revealed, it had one solid moment to shine, and that was basically it. Almost to the point where I wondered why even have a 9th Titan to include it. Same thing with giving our characters moments to breathe. The series is very plot heavy, and it's dependent on its twists and turns. But in doing so, the plot never tends to slow down, to just enjoy some of the more quiet moments between the characters. And as somebody who prefers really great characters over plot sometimes, I would have liked more moments of seeing the characters just hanging out. There are also some characters who get lost in the shuffle, like Historia, who doesn't really have anything to do after a particular point in the manga, for example, and I kind of let it slide for the longest time, waiting for her to kind of come back in the story and do something, but now that I've read the entire thing and I realize she doesn't, that is definitely a major disappointment. And there's pet peeves that I have that are just for me and don't really reflect the story overall, but it is the artwork. It's very hit or miss for me. Sometimes I think Isayama can draw incredible panels and splash pages, but other times, especially in the earlier volumes, it was very difficult to get a sense of the action movements and what was actually going on. Also, a lot of his character designs are very similar, and I honestly had a hard time telling Reiner and Jean apart for the first few volumes. I know, that's probably just a me thing, but I gotta be honest about it. But overall, I think Attack on Titan is a very poignant and incredible series to experience. If you are someone who actively likes to look for the deeper messages in media, this is 100% what you want to mess with. On its surface level, it's people fighting each other in Flesh Gundam suits, which is definitely very cool. But for me, the thing that blew me away was not expecting the themes I was going to get presented with. As someone who honestly thought all there was to this manga were people fighting giant zombie creatures, I was pleasantly surprised that I got way more than I bargained for. It's probably not fair to call Attack on Titan a newer manga since it has been around for over a decade now, but as newer manga series have failed to gain my interest to a very high level more than average, Attack on Titan stands out as something that's really special. Maybe it's mainstream, but that doesn't bother me in the slightest, and maybe what I get out of it isn't what other people see, and that's okay too. I just know that the journey I went on in this world was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I thank Hajime Isayama for that. I also thank all of you if you've made it this far in the video. I thought it was only right that I give you a final, full recap of my thoughts on the story, and I don't know if this will be my final Attack on Titan video. Of all the manga series that I have covered, I have experienced the most amount of toxic fans when it comes to Attack on Titan. And this is a small, loud minority of the fandom, but the toxic Attack on Titan fans are just, they're just the worst, man. For a series that talks about the value of communication and why it's wrong to hate people that are different than you, some of the fans really do not get this and do nothing but attack others. Now, a piece of the fandom that I don't like is not enough for me to stop making videos or anything, but now that I've reviewed the whole series, I think I shared my piece and I might want to lay it to rest for a little while. But I really want to thank you for joining me on my progress through it and for watching this video. As I try more and more to make YouTube a legitimate path for my life, it is you guys that are making that seem like the light at the end of the tunnel is becoming just a bit brighter. So if you haven't yet, I'd appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button and the bell notifications. Or if you'd like to support the channel on that deeper level, you can check the description below. I have a merch store. You can pick yourself up a shirt or a coffee mug or anything like that. And a Patreon if you want to check out some of the tiers there and think it would be worth your while. That would be really cool too. As always, guys, thank you for watching this video. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time.